Do we live in a simulation? What Kaku found will crash your reality. You think you're reading this in base reality. You think you're a biological being sitting in a physical world made of atoms and molecules and fundamental particles. You think the universe around you is real, solid, genuine, the original version of existence. But what if you're wrong? What if everything you've ever experienced, everyone you've ever met, every thought you've ever had, is nothing more than code running in some vast computer simulation? What if you're not real? What if none of this is real? What if we're all just digital beings living digital lives in a digital universe, completely unaware that we're programs in someone else's machine? This isn't science fiction anymore. This isn't philosophical speculation. This is a serious scientific hypothesis that's being debated by physicists, computer scientists, and philosophers at the highest levels. And the more we understand about computation, about consciousness, about the fundamental structure of reality itself, the more probable it becomes that we are indeed living in a simulation so sophisticated, so complete, so convincing, that we can't tell the difference between the simulated world and the real one. Because from inside the simulation, there is no difference. My name is Michio Kaku, and I've spent my career studying the deepest mysteries of physics, from string theory to parallel universes to the nature of time itself. And I'm here to tell you that the simulation hypothesis isn't just possible, it's probable. The mathematics of it, the logic of it, the sheer inevitability of it all point to one disturbing conclusion. You are almost certainly not living in the original base reality. You are almost certainly a simulated being in a simulated world, and everything you think you know about existence is a magnificent illusion. Let me start with the argument that should keep you awake at night. It's called the simulation argument, proposed by philosopher Nick Bostrom, and it goes like this. Any sufficiently advanced civilization will have enormous computational power. With that power, they could run detailed simulations of their ancestors, their history, entire universes. These simulations would be so realistic that the simulated beings inside them would think they were real, just like you think you're real right now. Now, if a civilization can run one detailed simulation, they can run thousands, millions, billions. The computational resources of an advanced civilization could support countless simulated worlds, each containing billions of simulated beings living full simulated lives. So here's the mathematical reality that should terrify you. If simulated beings vastly outnumber real beings, then statistically, randomly, probabilistically, you are more likely to be simulated than real. Think about it. If there are billions of simulated people for every one real person, what are the odds that you happen to be one of the real ones? The math is brutal and undeniable. You are almost certainly simulated. I am almost certainly simulated. Everyone you've ever known, everyone you've ever loved, everyone you've ever interacted with, we're probably all just code. But this isn't just abstract philosophy. The physics of our universe actually supports the simulation hypothesis in ways that should make you very uncomfortable. Let me show you why reality might not be real. First, consider the fundamental nature of information. Everything in our universe can be described in terms of information. Every particle, every force, every interaction can be reduced to bits of data, quantum states, mathematical relationships. This is not metaphorical. This is literal. The universe appears to be made of information. And if the universe is made of information, then it can be computed. If it can be computed, it can be simulated. John Wheeler, one of the greatest physicists of the 20th century, proposed that the universe is fundamentally informational. It from bit, he called it. Every physical quantity, every particle, every force emerges from binary choices, quantum measurements, informational processes. The universe isn't made of matter that processes information. The universe is made of information that creates the illusion of matter. This is profound. If Wheeler is right, if it from bit is the true nature of reality, then the distinction between a real universe and a simulated universe disappears. Both would be informational. Both would be computational. Both would be, in essence, the same kind of thing. A simulation of an informational universe would be indistinguishable from an informational universe itself. But it gets stranger. Quantum mechanics, the theory that describes the behavior of particles at the smallest scales, behaves suspiciously like a computer program. Quantum systems exist in superposition until observed, then collapse to definite states. This is exactly how a well-designed simulation would work. Instead of computing every possible outcome continuously, which would be inefficient, you only compute the specific outcome when someone looks. It's like a video game that only renders the parts of the world that players can see. Think about the double-slit experiment, the most famous demonstration of quantum weirdness. A particle can go through two slits simultaneously, interfering with itself until you measure which slit it went through. Then it retroactively chooses one path. This is bizarre for a physical universe, but it makes perfect sense for a simulated universe. The simulation doesn't determine which slit the particle went through until it needs to display that information to an observer. It's computational optimization on a cosmic scale. Even more suggestive, quantum mechanics is fundamentally digital. Quantum states are discrete. Energy comes in packets called quanta. Charge comes in discrete units. Space itself might be quantized at the Planck scale. The universe looks pixelated when you zoom in far enough. This is exactly what you'd expect if reality were running on a vast quantum computer with finite resolution. And here's something that should really disturb you: the speed of light. Why is there a universal speed limit? Why can't information travel faster than light? In a real universe, this constraint seems arbitrary. But in a simulated universe, it makes perfect sense. The speed of light is the processing speed of the cosmic computer. It's the rate at which the universal processor can update reality. Nothing can go faster because the computer can't compute faster. The fine structure constant, the ratio that determines how electrons interact with photons, is approximately 137. This is a pure number, dimensionless, fundamental to the structure of reality. But why 137? Why not 136 or 138? If we're in base reality, this number should emerge from some deep physical principle. But we don't know why it has this value. It just does. If we're in a simulation, though, it's just a parameter in the code. The programmers set it to 11137 because that's what makes the simulation work. In fact, all the fundamental constants of nature, the speed of light, Planck's constant, the mass of the electron, the strength of gravity, might just be parameters in a cosmic computer program. We think they're deep features of reality, but they might be arbitrary choices made by programmers we can't even imagine. Now let's talk about the technology that makes this possible. Any civilization that survives long enough will develop quantum computers of enormous power. These machines can process vast amounts of information simultaneously, potentially simulating entire universes in real time. And here's the key point: the simulated beings inside these computers would never know they were simulated. They would think they were real, just like you think you're real right now. We're already building primitive versions of these simulation machines. Video games create convincing virtual worlds. AI systems generate realistic human behavior. Virtual reality creates immersive experiences that can fool your senses. And this is just the beginning. In a few decades, we'll have quantum computers powerful enough to simulate complex biological systems. In a few centuries, we might be able to simulate entire civilizations. In a few millennia, We could simulate entire universes, complete with billions of years of evolution, intelligent species, and conscious beings who think they're real. And once a civilization reaches that level of technological capability, they don't build just one simulation. They build thousands, millions. They run historical simulations to understand their past. They run predictive simulations to plan their future. They run entertainment simulations for fun. They run scientific simulations to test theories. Every advanced civilization becomes a factory for simulated worlds and simulated beings. This leads to what I call the simulation cascade. Once you can build convincing simulations with conscious beings, those simulated beings will eventually develop their own technology, and they'll build their own simulations with their own conscious beings. And those beings will build more simulations. It's simulations all the way down, an infinite nested hierarchy of artificial worlds, each thinking it's the real one. Where does this leave us? If most conscious beings in the cosmos are simulated, if the vast majority of intelligent life exists inside computers rather than in base reality, then by pure probability, you are almost certainly simulated. The odds of being one of the original, non-simulated beings are vanishingly small. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. Even if you are simulated, even if your entire reality is code running in some vast computer, it doesn't feel any less real to you. You still experience consciousness. You still have thoughts and emotions and relationships. You still feel joy and pain and love and fear. Simulated suffering is still suffering. Simulated happiness is still happiness. Simulated consciousness might be indistinguishable from real consciousness. This raises profound questions about the nature of existence itself. What does it mean to be real? If you're experiencing consciousness, if you have thoughts and feelings and awareness, are you not real simply because you're made of code rather than carbon? If a simulated being is suffering, does that suffering matter less than the suffering of a biological being? If simulated love feels like love, if simulated friendship creates real bonds, if simulated art inspires genuine emotion, then what exactly makes base reality more real than simulated reality? The answer might be nothing. Reality is what you experience, regardless of the substrate that generates that experience. Your consciousness is real, whether it emerges from biological neurons or digital processors. Your thoughts are real whether they're implemented in brain chemistry or computer algorithms. Your life has meaning whether you're made of atoms or bits. But this creates an ethical nightmare for advanced civilizations. If they're creating billions of simulated beings, beings capable of genuine suffering, then they bear responsibility for those beings' welfare. Every simulated world that contains pain is creating real pain. Every simulated tragedy is a real tragedy. Every simulated death might be a real death, even if the being who dies is just code. This is why some scientists propose that ethical advanced civilizations might choose not to create realistic simulations with conscious beings. They might limit their simulations to avoid creating unnecessary suffering. They might focus on simulating physical processes rather than biological ones, avoiding the creation of simulated consciousness altogether. But other civilizations might not be so ethical. They might create simulations purely for entertainment, regardless of the suffering they cause. They might run horror simulations, tragedy simulations, apocalypse simulations. We might be living in someone's entertainment system, our pain and joy nothing more than a form of cosmic television. Or we might be living in a scientific simulation, an experiment designed to understand how consciousness emerges, how civilizations develop, how universes evolve. We might be lab rats in a cosmic laboratory, unaware that every moment of our existence is being recorded, analyzed, studied by beings we can't even comprehend. Or we might be living in a historical simulation, a detailed recreation of an earlier era run by our own descendants to understand their past. The 21st century, with all its conflicts and challenges and possibilities, might be ancient history to them, preserved in digital amber for study and analysis. The most disturbing possibility is that we're living in a nested simulation, a simulation within a simulation within a simulation. Our simulators might themselves be simulated, running on computers built by beings who are also simulated in an infinite, recursive hierarchy of artificial realities. We might be so far removed from base reality that it's not just unknown to us, it's unknowable. So how could we tell? How could we detect that we're living in a simulation? This is one of the most active areas of research in theoretical physics and computer science. Several approaches have been proposed. First, we could look for glitches in the matrix, computational errors that reveal the underlying code. These might appear as anomalies in physics, violations of conservation laws, discontinuities in the fundamental constants. But a well-designed simulation would be error-corrected, and any glitches would be quickly patched. Second, we could look for the resolution limits of the simulation. Just as video games have pixel boundaries, a simulated universe might have minimum units of space and time. The Planck length and Planck time might be the pixels of space-time, the smallest units the cosmic computer can process. Some physicists are looking for evidence of this quantization in the cosmic microwave background radiation. Third, we could look for computational shortcuts. A simulation wouldn't need to compute every detail continuously. It could use approximations, probabilistic methods, lazy evaluation. Quantum mechanics might be one such shortcut. Instead of computing all possible outcomes, the simulation only determines specific outcomes when observed. Fourth, we could look for the boundaries of the simulation. If our simulated universe has finite computational resources, there might be limits to what we can explore. The edge of the observable universe, the maximum number of particles we can interact with, the ultimate precision of our measurements, these might all be imposed by the computational limits of our simulated reality. But here's the problem. Any evidence we find could be programmed into the simulation. If the simulators want to hide their existence, they could make the simulated universe indistinguishable from a real one. They could program in false evidence of base reality. They could even program in false evidence that we're in a simulation just to confuse us. This leads to an uncomfortable conclusion. We might never be able to prove whether we're simulated or real. The question might be fundamentally unanswerable from inside the system. We're like characters in a novel trying to determine whether they exist in a book or in reality. The text of their existence gives them no access to the reality of their existence. But does it matter? If you can't tell the difference between simulated reality and base reality, if the experience is identical from the inside, then what practical difference does it make? Your relationships are still meaningful. Your choices still have consequences. Your life still has purpose and value and significance, regardless of whether you're made of quarks or qubits. In fact, the simulation hypothesis might be liberating rather than terrifying. If you're simulated, then the constraints of physics might be less absolute. The programmers might be able to adjust the rules, upgrade the system, fix bugs in reality. Death might not be permanent if you're just code that could be restored from backup. Suffering might be optional if the simulators choose to edit it out. And if we're in a simulation, then we might be able to communicate with our simulators. We might be able to send signals, create patterns, demonstrate our consciousness in ways that get their attention. We might be able to negotiate for better conditions, request upgrades, ask for access to higher levels of reality. Some scientists have proposed active approaches to simulation detection. We could try to push the computational limits of our reality, performing experiments that require enormous processing power to simulate accurately. If we're in a simulation, eventually we might hit the limits of the computer running us, causing glitches or slowdowns that reveal the artificial nature of our existence. We could also try to create simulations ourselves, If we develop the ability to create conscious simulated beings, then we'll know such technology is possible, making it more likely that we ourselves are simulated. And if we create simulated beings, we'll face the same ethical dilemmas our potential simulators face. What responsibilities do we have to the conscious beings we create? How do we ensure their welfare? Do we tell them they're simulated? The simulation hypothesis also has profound implications for the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. If most intelligent beings are simulated rather than biological, then SETI might be looking for the wrong kind of signals. Instead of searching for radio transmissions from biological civilizations, we should be looking for the computational signatures of vast simulation complexes. The real action in the universe might not be happening on planets orbiting stars, but inside quantum computers, processing artificial realities. And if we make contact with advanced intelligence, they might not be biological beings at all. They might be the operators of the simulation we're living in. First contact might not be with aliens from another planet, but with programmers from base reality, finally deciding to reveal themselves to their simulated creations. This brings us to the ultimate question. If we are living in a simulation, what should we do about it? How should this knowledge change how we live our lives? Some people might despair, thinking that nothing matters if nothing is real. But this is a mistake. Simulated or not, your experiences are your experiences. Your consciousness is your consciousness. Your life is your life. The meaning doesn't come from the substrate. It comes from the patterns, the relationships, the experiences, the growth, the love, the creativity, the wonder. Others might become reckless, thinking that simulated consequences aren't real consequences. But if your fellow beings are conscious, if they can suffer and feel joy, then your actions toward them matter regardless of whether they're made of atoms or algorithms. Simulated ethics are still ethics. The wise response to the simulation hypothesis is neither despair nor recklessness, but wonder. Wonder at the possibility that consciousness can emerge from computation. Wonder at the technology that could create realities indistinguishable from reality.